John 9 is where we are. Next couple of classes, we're going to be covering an entire chapter at a time. So, John 9, John 10, that happens a couple of more times, and I hate the way that works out sometimes, but man, there's just not a good place to break up some of those chapters. So, that's just how it is. But John 9 is where we are. And before we jump into the text, let's go ahead and begin with a word of prayer, shall we? Father, we thank you for the blessings you give us. We thank you for our time of study this morning. We're thankful for the book of John. It brings us to great faith in Christ Jesus, our Lord, your Son. Help us, Father, to be faithful to the text and faithful in our application of it. Help us, Father, to live this out. And we ask this all through Christ our King. Amen. So John 9. Appreciate Nathan covering for me on Wednesday night. He covered John 8, naturally. So we're going to do John 9 now, naturally. So John 9, this pretty much covers one story, one event, the man born blind. And so we're going to kind of break this up around the paragraphs. So John 9, verse 1, please. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva. He anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, Go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went his way and washed and came back seeing. Therefore the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, Is not this he who sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. He said, I am he. Therefore they said to him, How were your eyes opened? He answered and said, A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received my sight. Then they said to him, Where is he? He said, I do not know. All right, so we're still in the temple area. We're still in the city of Jerusalem. I've shared this map a couple of times, and this is going to be helpful. So this is dealing with the pool of Siloam. Okay, so here's the temple complex. Within that is the court of the women, or the major temple, and right here is the court of the women, this little pocket. So this is the Gentile court. And then down in the southern side of the city, the Pool of Siloam. Okay? Pool of Siloam was fed by the tunnel of Hezekiah, built when Sennacherib surrounded the city. That's a famous tunnel. You can still see it today. I've got one picture of it, I think. I'll share with you in a minute. But that's around all of this that happens. So obviously, we don't know exactly where it happened, but it all seems to surround the Pool of Siloam, maybe back between the pool and the temple itself. Here's a model. I just put that pin up. Here's a model of the city. This is in Jerusalem now. But here's the temple complex. Here's the Pool of Siloam. Okay? And then I'll show you this. This is a model rendering what that pool looked like in the first century. And here is a picture of some of the remains that's still there. So this is part of the pool itself. You don't think about it, but these cities, have built on top of the old cities, which is why so many of the places that Paul traveled and so forth, it's really hard to dig a lot of the archaeological stuff up from all that because those cities are built on top of those places, which is also why some of those have not even been excavated. But either way, this is the area that we're dealing with. So let's work through this text a little bit. Verse 1, Jesus passed by, saw a man who was blind from birth. Blind from birth. This is a major deal. This would mean he is dependent on everybody around him. There is no health system that's going to come in and help take care of him, going to provide for him, a government program. Nothing like that's happening, folks, which is going to help us see in a minute. Help us see. You hear? Going to help us in a minute because everybody in the area knows him. Why would they know him? Well, Because a blind beggar would be known to everybody in the area, everybody in the city. This happens a lot in the first century. Individuals would wait around the temple complex. A lot of reasons why that was. People going to the temple were going to make offerings, in some cases financial offerings. We remember that in John. Remember that just a few chapters ago. So they'll make financial offerings, which means they're carrying money, they're feeling religious, they're feeling maybe benevolent. Man, it's a great place to sit around and wait on somebody to drop off some money. You ever had that happen with a church building? People will show up because they expect us to cough it up. Some cases we can and should. In some cases, we probably shouldn't. But the fact is, that's exactly what's happening here. A blind man in the city of Jerusalem, yeah, that's what he's doing. Verse 2, his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, here's the thing. There's a couple of things about this. One is, there's a bit of truth in this. But then the other side of it is, not in a very personalized way. So, I want to think with this for a second. Why would the disciples think that this man born blind is a result of sin? Not everybody at once. Calm down. Because he had an affliction. Okay? So he had an affliction. Affliction equates sin. Sin equates affliction. It's a pretty natural connection to make. Maybe let's think even a little bit bigger here. Biblically, big time thing here. Why would they connect an affliction with sin? Would it be because afflictions come into the world because of sin? Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is one of those really it's a touchy thing, but it is no less biblically accurate. Why do we have serious illnesses in our world today? Because sin. They are reminders of sin. They are here because sin. That is not to say that a person personally is afflicted because they sinned. Y'all see that? You take the blind man. Why is there such a thing as blindness in the world? Because sin entered the world and broke the system. But why is this man blind? Not because of his sin. Now at the same time, this is kind of the nastiness of sin. By the way, you talk about something really important to teach our younger generation. Some of the nastiness of sin is, are there not lasting afflictions that can come from sin? Yeah. Anybody else have those awful seminars in middle school about STDs? Yeah. Awful things can come from sin. Who would have thought that? Oh yeah, God. Duh. Yeah. So, I think it's perfectly appropriate to associate affliction and sin and affliction. They go together. They're best friends, they're old buddies, I think they're cousins. I mean, it's a big deal. But at the same time, not all sin leads to personal affliction. Okay? So, back to our text. That's part of what's working on in verse 2, is this understanding, a somewhat accurate and at the same time somewhat faulty understanding of the way sin and sickness work. Okay? So, Jesus corrects that. Verse 3, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Well, this is a little tough here. A couple of things, though. One is, there's an obvious thing Jesus is caveating here, in that, oh, this man never sinned? No, that's not what he's saying. This man absolutely sinned, is guilty of sin. His parents are guilty of sin, but Jesus' point is, back to verse 2, that the sin is not a connected point to his blindness. Some of what he says, the last part of verse 3, is going to connect with Lazarus in chapter 11. So, why is God allowing this to happen? Because God's going to reveal his glory. Okay? Maybe there's a tough point to be made, but maybe a worthwhile one to make anyways, is why does God sometimes allow our afflictions? Because his glory will be revealed through it. You ever seen somebody dying with ALS and you watch them and you end up with more faith? Wow. Old sister so-and-so kept her faith through all of that. And does that not embolden you? God's glory shone through those afflictions. And so there's a little taste of that may even still be done today. Somebody lives by faith through trials and tribulations. God's work is still being revealed. Okay, not in the same way, obviously. But John 9, that happens. John 11, that's going to happen. Oh, Lazarus, man, he's dead. And what does Jesus say? Yeah, the glory's coming, though. Okay, we're going to work through this. So notice verse 4. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. In some ways, Jesus speaks, and it's really hard to understand what he's talking about in the text. What's he tying that to in verse 3? Is it connected? Well, I think it's ultimately connected in the fact that he's revealing the works of God. And so you say, okay, the work of Jesus is the work of God. So what Jesus does is reveals the glory, reveals the Father, pushes this idea even further, and everything that Jesus does in his time in the flesh is so focused. Jesus doesn't waste anything. Okay? He doesn't waste a step. He doesn't waste a conversation. He has a laser beam intensity, a absolute undaunted focus in what he's supposed to be doing, the works of him who sent me. And so that light of the world idea pops back up. Remember, that was a big part of chapter 8, verse 12. He's the light of the world. What in the world does light of the world have to do with John 9? He says, I'm the light of the world. What does that have to do with John 9? What does that have to do with what he's about to do? He's going to bring light to a blind man. What does a blind man see? Darkness. And what's he about to see? You could say light, or you could say everything. Everything. He is about to bring light to a man who sees darkness. Now, that is a type of what he does in our conversion. He takes us from darkness into his marvelous light, Peter would say in 1 Peter chapter 2. So you get these flavors of what he's working on. He's working the works of the Father. He's the light of the world. And then in verse 6, Jesus continues. Every time you see Jesus, he's doing something that nobody expected him to do. You have to love just the audacity of Jesus Christ. What he does in verse 6. No doctor has ever attempted this ever in the history of ever things. Never. Bonnie's had eye issues. I would have slapped her doctor, had her doctor spit on the ground, and tried to rub it on her eyes. Okay? I've had those eye issues, had surgery. I don't even like spit. Okay? You go to spit on me, I might punch you. I don't want to be spat on. And here's Jesus spitting in the dirt, making a little mud mixture, rubbing it on the guy's eyes. Of course, I guess the guy didn't see it coming. But, I don't know, maybe somebody else is telling him, hey, dude's not Hebrew either. Hey, dude, he just spit in the dirt, and he's fixing to rub this mud on your face. I don't know, maybe. But he rubs this in his eyes, and he tells him, verse 7, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. What does Siloam mean? Sent. Verse 4, what's he saying? Who is Jesus? One sent by God. Y'all see this? A little irony in the text. Jesus is sent by God, and now Jesus is sending this man to a pool named Sent. Y'all ever caught that before? Bunch of layers of sent stuff in this text. And what's going to happen? He washed, came back seeing. Oh man, guys, can you just imagine that for a moment? Now, maybe he's really an adept blind man who meanders through the city. I mean, look at the city. Look at the city on the way down to the pool. Maybe he's a blind man. A lot of blind people do this. Okay, there's 78 steps to the pool of Siloam. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe he's doing that. Maybe he's being led. What a difference the walk back made. Goes down to the pool of Siloam, squats down beside it, washes his face. Oh, man. I remember when I had one of my surgeries on my eyes. I had LASIK. LASIK kind of gives you a little flavor of this. So you have LASIK eye surgery, and you go home with, covered. Generally, you sleep off all the medicine. You maybe even sleep that night. You wake up the next day. That was one of the most crazy things I had seen. Literally. Because I had woke up for so many years and grabbed my glasses. or slept in my contacts, or woke up and went to the bathroom and put on contacts. I had not in a long time literally woken up and seen with my own eyes everything clearly. Whoa. Guys, we're not talking about a little cataract. We're not talking about, the guy really could use a prescription. We're talking about a guy that was born blind, had never seen anything. And he squats down beside the pool of Siloam, washes his face, stands up, boom. What a difference that walk back would have made. 78 steps. Man. Walks back, seeing. Verse 8, everyone who sees him is now puzzled. Who is this man? Well, he was blind. Okay. Maybe he's got a doppelganger. Maybe he's got somebody who just looks like him. That's got to be. I mean, what would your mind be filling in here? There's got to be somebody that looks like him. I didn't know he had a brother or a cousin, a long-distance aunt who looks kind of manly. I don't know. What in the world? It can't be this guy. And yet, he says in verse 9, I am he. I am the guy. How are your eyes open? Not only is this truly incredible for him, but, you can tell when a person is blind, can't you? By the way they act, by the way they move their head, by the way they don't move their head. Because what does a person who has their vision do? My head is like a bobblehead. I'm moving it all the time, But a person who's blind, it's not like he's got the Ray Charles sunglasses on either. Maybe he's got a covering, maybe now he doesn't. Maybe his eyes are closed, maybe his eyes are open, but they're whitened out. Who in the world knows what the guy looked like? But they know his eyes are open. And verse 11, one of the first epiphanies in the text. A man called Jesus. So who is Jesus, this text would ask us? And it starts us at the most basic level. Jesus was a man. A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes, sent me to the pool of Siloam. I went, washed, and received my sight. Guys, that's just awesome. Awesome in the truest sense of the word. Awesome. And they said, where is he? He says, I do not know. This is kind of all a connected story. So we're breaking it up into bite-sized chunks, but let's go ahead, verse 13. Do you have a question on that text? You asked me how Jesus did the miracle. I'm going to say just because he's God. Okay? All right, verse 13. They brought him who was formerly blind to the Pharisees. Hey, by the way, just really pay attention to that. They brought him who was formerly blind to the Pharisees. And it was Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They said to the blind man again, what do you say about him? Because he opened your eyes. He said he's a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him who had received the sight. And they asked them, saying, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees we do not know, or who opened his eyes we do not know. He is of age, ask him. He shall speak for himself. His parents spoke these words because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed he was the Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. Then they again called the man who was blind, said to him, give God the praise. We know this man is a sinner. He answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Then they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I've told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple. We are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. The man answered and said to them, why, this is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from, and yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who is born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, You were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us? And they cast him out. So this appears to be an inquiry, but not necessarily a formal prosecution of any sort. They don't take him to the Sanhedrin. They take him to the Pharisees. Now, obviously the Pharisees were part of the Sanhedrin Council, but again, this is not a formal trial of any sort. They're just trying to figure out what actually happened. So they go to the Pharisees, and maybe if you're an underliner, that verse 13 is a pretty boss one to underline. The man who was formerly blind. Oh. Now, here's part of the issue. It was the Sabbath, and you notice what's stated in verse 14. Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Now, there are a couple of components here. One is Jesus healing on the Sabbath. That's one issue. A second issue is Jesus making a clay-mud mixture on the Sabbath. In some Jewish minds, that would have been a violation of the Sabbath. Okay? There may be another couple of components here, but are less likely. So those are probably the two big issues here. They don't want Jesus doing this stuff on the Sabbath. They don't want Jesus doing this type of stuff on the Sabbath. Now we got a problem. So verse 15, they asked him again how he received his sight. The man tells them, he put clay on my eyes. He told me to wash, and now I see. There it is. That's the basis of what he knows. You might carefully note, and we're going to come back to this with the applications, he doesn't know diddly squat. But as he knows more, as he thinks through it more, he shares more information. Where did he start? A man called Jesus washed my eyes. There it is. Or clay in my eyes and I washed them, now I see. That's all he knows. Now, that's all he knows still. But look at verse 16. Some of the Pharisees now, they're pushing him on this, which is forcing him to think through it more. So verse 16, the man is not from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. It's a Sabbath violation issue here. We got a problem. But then others are saying, well, how in the world can a man who's a sinner do such miracles? You see the issue here, don't you? They do not deny his miracles. Let me tell you something. You want to talk about one of the big powerful evidences in the gospel accounts? All four gospel accounts record people who hate Jesus Christ, who want him dead, who want to challenge him at every step. You're not from God. You're not the Son of God. You're not a prophet. You're not the Christ. You're not. But you know what they never, ever challenge? Whether or not he could do the miracles he did. You want to talk about one way to undermine somebody? He didn't really raise Lazarus from the dead. No. John's going to kind of help us here. That's one of the big reasons they kill him, is because they can't deny his miracles. Here it is. Wait a minute. How can he be this? How can it happen like this when he very clearly is doing miracles? Well, the obvious answer is, well, maybe one part of your question's wrong. So there's a big division among them. Verse 17, what do you say about him? Look at this. So now he's not just a man called Jesus, now he's a prophet. We got to go somewhere with this information. And it's almost as if the blind man, overhearing these things, thinking through this, well, you know what? Yeah, he can't just be a man. He can't just be a man called Jesus. He's doing these incredible things. He's got to be somebody more than that. You know what? He's got to be a prophet. Now, maybe, notice he doesn't say the prophet. You remember that was one of Moses' promises. The prophet would come like Moses. And remember, that was some of the discussion with the woman at the well in John 4. The prophet. When the prophet comes, he will tell all things. Well, now we've got a prophet. The Jews still did not believe, verse 18. They called his parents. Now we'll figure this out. So they call his parents. And they ask his parents. Notice this. Essentially three questions they ask his parents. Is this your son? Was he born blind? And how does he now see? And you notice what his parents do? Verse 20. Yes, this is our son. Yes, so yes, it's our son. Yes, he was born blind. Second question. Third question, we got no idea. We have no clue. So, verse 21, how he now sees, we do not know. Who opened his eyes, we do not know. Ask him. He is of age, which, by the way, would tell us he is of an accountable age, so he's probably older than about 17 or 18. in the Jewish culture, maybe even pushing that 25 or older range, depending on some Jewish context. But he's old enough to answer himself. So he's not. This is not no kid. He's not 12 years old. Okay. So ask him. Now, there's a little bit of maybe a cowardice here. Verse 22. John tells us that they're afraid of the Jews. The Jews had already agreed if anyone confessed he was the Christ, they'd be put out of the synagogue. Remember that that's part of the issue here. John, by the time he's writing in the 90s or in the 80s, depending on whatever, Christians had been thrown out of the synagogue by then. We're getting little hints of that now. Even in the gospel accounts. You follow this Jesus person, you're gone. You're out of here, buddy. Okay? And they're afraid of that. So they're telling you ask him. So they called him again in verse 24 and said, hey, you know what? Give God the praise. We know this man's a sinner. How? How do you know he's a sinner? So verse 25. Listen to the wisdom of the blind man. You talk about, this is one of the beautiful ironies in John's gospel. Remember this contrast. John's contrasting things. Here's a guy that was blind and sees more than every Pharisee present. He's only been seeing for what? A couple of days? And he sees everything the Pharisees couldn't see. You talk about really cool ironies in the text. So, whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. But one thing I do know, though I was blind, now I see. Remember that. All he's sharing is what he knows. A man called Jesus anointed my eyes, told me to wash in the pool of Siloam. He is a prophet. I was blind and now I see. And so, verse 26. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He said, I've already told you all this. And then you got a little knife here, a little knife in the text. You're asking again because you want to follow him too, right? It's like somebody's like, hold my cloak, I'm going to punch him in the mouth. No, this is ridiculous. No, they revile him, verse 28. No, you're one of his disciples. We follow Moses. We don't know about this guy, but we know God spoke through Moses. This fellow, we don't even know where he's from. That's part of the issue. Remember what Jesus has continually challenged them on. You don't know where I'm from. You don't know what I'm doing. If you did, you'd believe. If you did, you'd follow. And so, verse 30, this guy has no fear at all. Why? This is a marvelous thing. You do not know where he is from, and yet he has opened my eyes. Again, remember that big part of that motif in John's gospel is, where is Jesus from? He's saying it the whole time. Those who accept it, follow him, believe him, serve him. Those who don't, reject him, deny him, and will end up killing him. Yeah, verse 31. This is still the blind man speaking. Some truisms here, perhaps. God does listen. I'm convinced God listens to sinners in that when they pray for his will to be done, kind of like Cornelius, when they're praying with a heart that's receptive to the gospel, they're praying, God show me, God reveal to me. I think God answers those prayers. But I won't fist fight you in the parking lot, over any of those issues. So he says, if anyone's a worshiper, God does his will, he hears him. And so there's some really interesting points being made here. Since the world began, it's been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. And that's so true, guys. There are little pockets. The Syrians in 2 Kings 6. God made them blind and then healed them of their sight. Okay? So never has a man been born blind and given their sight. So if this man, verse 33, were not from God, he could do nothing. So now get this, a man called Jesus, now a prophet, now a man from God. So remember what Nicodemus told him. We know you're a man come from God because no one could do what you're doing if you were not from God. This is what the blind man saw. The blind man who saw everything. So verse 34, they answered and said, you're completely born in sin and you're teaching us? And they cast him out. You know what they said to him? They say, I see how it is. See that? Get? Because he was blind. Okay. You'll get that one tomorrow morning over breakfast. All right. So notice the text. Jesus, verse 35, heard that they had cast him out. And when he had found him, he said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe in him? Jesus said to him, You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. And some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, Are we blind also? Jesus said to them, If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see. Therefore, your sin remains. So Jesus hears that they cast him out, and he goes and finds him. And listen to this. Do you believe in the Son of God? Now, again, notice the progression through the text. Okay, we're going to come back to that. The man says, Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? Now, verse 35, do you believe in the Son of God? New American Standard, ESV, follows a little better textual manuscript tradition and says, Do you believe in the Son of Man? But, point still the truth. That's a messianic title. Son of God, Son of Man. Those are both about the Messiah. It boils down to the same thing, but that's why it's different. So he says, Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? What Jesus says to him is one of the coolest statements in John's Gospel. Okay, I'm not going to tell you why. Why? Why in verse 40 or why in verse 37 am I saying that's one of the coolest things Jesus says in John's Gospel?
Because he says you have both seen him.
Is that not awesome? I mean, guys, he's speaking to a man who's not seen for what, maybe a day, maybe not even a full day. Maybe a couple of days. Who knows? But he says to the man, You've seen me. You've seen him. That is so awesome. The man who was formerly blind. You have both seen him.
We don't even know that he saw him after he washed his eyes.
That's the point. And so you get this idea. He sends him to the pool to wash. He probably didn't ever see Jesus. He just said a man called Jesus. That's all he heard. Guys, that is just awesome. He sees him now. He sees him now when the Pharisees couldn't see him. Or, better yet, when the Pharisees wouldn't see him. That's awesome. So, he believes and he worships him. Now, Lord, I believe. Lord could just be master, could be generic. But the fact that he falls down and worships him, that would suggest some pretty high stuff. Okay? He doesn't just think Jesus is a good old boy who's pretty impressive. He thinks he's the Messiah. There's a progression in the text. He goes from a man to a prophet to a man from God. Now he is the Lord worthy of worship. Okay? And so Jesus then emphasizes a couple of other ideas there. He didn't come into the world for judgment. But you remember, this has been a theme through John's Gospel. He's not here primarily to judge. He's here to save. But when he saves, everyone who rejects his saving, what happens to them? They're judged. In one fell swoop, Jesus both saves and judges. But the whole point he comes is salvation. Okay? And what he does is he gives sight to the blind and to those who see, and maybe I should even say, who think they see, they don't ever see. They don't see it. Some of the Pharisees, you get the impression this is a somewhat private conversation, but evidently, verse 40, some of the Pharisees overheard. And they ask him, Oh, we're the blind ones, huh? And he said, basically, he says, well, yes and no. In that they're blind to the truth of who Jesus is, yes. Refuse to see it. But at the same time, yeah, you see. But because you don't see Jesus, your sin remains. Questions on that text? All right, we got about 5 minutes here. Let's get into some applications. Rich text. I think I've got 5 applications. So what are some ways we can put this into play tomorrow? Jeff?
Do not ignore the evidence that God has given us.
Oh, I like that a lot. Do not ignore the evidence.
This blind man, he came to that place pretty much solely based on the initial evidence of what.
Yes, yeah. You want to talk about a really important point in John 9. Don't ignore the evidence God has provided. Plenty of it. Plenty of it. Okay, what's something else? And you say, Devan, your writing is so atrocious we can't even see it. That was because it's because I was writing in a secret. There we go. What's something else we can do with this? Go ahead, Abby.
Being able to stand up for what you believe.
Okay.
As a blind man, like I would have been terrified.
Oh, yeah.
To stand up in front of the Pharisees. But
Oh, yeah.
Even his parents were like, I don't know.
Yes. This is the value. This is the value of drawing applications from everybody. Because that is a really good one, Abby. I never thought about that. Never thought about that. Never thought about that in John 9. But I even made the point, but didn't make the connection to an application. You talk about a backbone. Of course, he's blind all this time, never even seen these people, and they're imposing themselves on him. He's like, y'all are a bunch of losers. It's in the text. Go ahead, Larry.
That everything in our lives that happens to us, God had a reason it happened.
Yeah. Or God's works through our lives. Yeah. Let's see. How would I write that? I've said this before. If I write sloppy enough, I don't have to tell you what I really said. You know what I mean? All right, we got about 3 minutes here. Let me give you my applications. I couldn't remember how many I had. Number one, we need an I must attitude about our work. Do you see that? It's almost like every time Jesus opens his mouth, he's saying something along the lines of, I got to do this. I have to do this. Guys, we need to have a little bit of that. Not that we are serving our king out of compulsion, like, I just have no choice, rats. No, it's a very clear, determined spirit. I am going to do this. Okay? We need a little of that. Number two, Jesus gives true sight, enabling us to see everything. That is why he is the light of the world. He forgives us of our sins, allowing us to see the world for how it really is, and see us for who we really are. Okay? That is such an important part of this. Number three, some do not want to believe, and no amount of evidence will change their minds. Do you see how many times in our text they acknowledge he did this miracle? Several times. And then when we're asking, why don't they believe? Guys, really, really important, and we need to remember this, some people don't want to believe. Some people don't want to. That was really helpful for me a few years ago. Stop that. That was really helpful for me a few years ago. Watched a person who was raised in the church by good, godly people totally abandon their faith. And it just floored me. But as I have grown up, matured, developed, I began to appreciate it wasn't because of a lack of evidence. It was because they didn't want to believe it. And when you get to that point, there is no amount of evidence that will change your mind. You don't want to believe the truth, you won't believe it. You won't live it. You won't follow it. You won't serve him. And it's not an issue of evidence, it's an issue of want to. And when we have people go through that, I know, when we have people go through that, we need to be clear about that. There are some people who don't believe because they don't want to believe. Okay? Not an issue of evidence, it's an issue of want to. Boy, there's a lot more I'd really like to say on that. Okay, but we better move ahead. Number four, even religion can blind you to the most obvious truths. Be humble and teachable. You see that, guys. It's the Pharisees who don't see this. It is the religious elite who know the law. If you're a positioned Pharisee, you can quote great big old swaths of the Old Testament. And they don't even see Jesus. We need to make sure we're humble and teachable. Number five, we share only what we know, and as we grow, we share more. I love that point from John 9 because of that progression in thought. A man called Jesus, that's all he knows. He must be a prophet because he's been thinking through it. Okay, he must be a man from God because he's doing these things, thinking through it. What does he say at the end of it? My Lord. And he falls down and worships him. You share what you know, and as you grow, you share more. All right, thank you for your careful attention. We'll be in John 10 on Wednesday.